Welcome back to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast and YouTube video with me, Johnny Pardo. Today, I welcome a very special guest, Adrian Devlin. Welcome, Adrian.
Thanks very much, Johnny. Thank you for having me, sir.
It's great you could join us, and I know we've been meaning to chat for a while, so really looking forward to our conversation today and the value you're going to give us. So thanks for coming on. So Adrian, just to give a bit of an introduction to Adrian came on the brink of suicide to go on a journey of self-discovery. After walking away from the corporate world, Adrian now works as a personal development coach and motivational speaker. He is a keen blogger and dedicated family man. He helps individuals who are feeling lost or directionless and unsure of what their next move should be in their life or career. Adrian firmly believes the relationship we have with ourselves is paramount to our growth. So fantastic mission for you to be looking at, Adrian. So it sounds like you've been very much on a strong self-discovery journey. Was there a moment for you where you really got into the self-discovery journey, or was there that kind of moment you went, this has to change and I want to change my life?
It had to change, Johnny, if I'm honest, because of where I was going. I was totally self-destructing, and there was no other, I didn't have another option. I suppose I'll tell you a bit about how everything sort of transpired. Back in 2013, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and I'm a father myself. I have 3 young children, an amazing, beautiful wife, and it was a difficult time to deal with to deal with my father's cancer. And I suppose as the years went on, in May 2017, he had eventually lost his battle against cancer and passed away. But in truth, when I look back, I thought I was in control of all the situations going on around me. I genuinely did. I thought I was seeing my dad in the hospice and at home, and I was going to work, and everything was just building and building and building and building inside me. And when he passed away, like there were times, Johnny, where I'd be driving work, and my dad would be in, this was before he passed away, and he'd be in hospital, and I'd get a phone call, and I would just say, I know he's took another turn. And I'd be crying in the car, and then I'd be having to pull up to go into a meeting, and I'd be nearly like dusting myself down and trying to settle myself. And I would be stepping out of a car, and it felt like I was kind of leaving myself behind. It was leaving a part of me in the car, and I was walking out to put on a show to make sure everything was okay and everything was good for everybody else. But inside, it was crippling me. And by the time I would get home to my family, I had nothing left to give them. And I would come home, and my kids would want to come up and see me. And I was so exhausted just to try and actually get through the day that I had nothing to give them. I was being very irritable around the house. I wasn't being pleasant to be around. I was always raising my voice. When I look back, I was really pushing my own family away. And it felt like really a mask was slipping off me. I was losing connection with who I'd always thought I was. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what was going on with me. And as I say, it constantly felt like there was a show being put on. And there was a couple of big moments. There was, after he died, it's probably a couple of months later, I remember coming home from work, and I opened the door and nobody came to greet me. Where my kids are young, everybody would have just usually come to the door and give me hugs and everything. And it chokes me up now. And when I was coming home and there was no one there to greet me, I started to question myself. I started to think, God, what am I doing here? What am I doing to my family? What am I doing to my wife? I'd be waking up in the morning, my wife would be getting the kids ready, getting everything sorted out. I would just be getting in the shower, putting on my suit, shouting because everybody was making noise, and just leaving and not being any help. Because to me, I was the only one suffering, and nobody understood my pain that I was going through. Because I had lost my dad, and then I felt like I was losing myself. I didn't know who I was. And then I remember another day I was sitting in the living room, and my kids were sitting on the stairs, and my wee boy was pretending to drive a car, and the two girls were sitting in the steps behind him. And he turned around to them and goes, "Be quiet back there. Everyone be quiet." And I sat in the living room and I heard this. And I thought to myself, that's me. He is just repeating what I have been doing. There's nobody coming to the door. I'm having this negative effect on my own children, the people I love the most out of anybody. I'm pushing my wife away. And I said to myself, and I convinced myself that they were all going to be better off without me. And I remember it was an August morning. And when I look back in this, I always imagine the kitchen being really, really dark. And I know it couldn't have been because it was a summer's morning. But in my head, even now, when I look back, I was like, jeepers, that was a really dark, overcast, just dark morning. And I remember I woke up again, rolled myself out of bed, shouted at everybody in the house. They left. And I remember my wife turned around to me and said, "Adrian, you need to do something." And I felt like I had a big band just tied right around the top of my head, like somebody was pulling the band so tightly. And I made a decision that I was going to take my own life. I felt a sense of relief that I had made this decision. And so I was like, well, I was going to get prepared. I was going to write a note. I was going to say, "Don't come into the garage, phone the police." And as I was doing all this and sort of getting prepped, I looked at my phone and there was a picture of my family on my phone. And there was just something come over, just says, "I can't do it." And I picked up my phone and I phoned a guy I knew, lovely guy, who had founded a mental health charity. And we went to the same gym. And I remember he had asked me a couple of weeks before, "Are you okay?" And it was probably him asking me that. My wife saying that just triggered something in me. And I phoned him and I said, "Ray," his name is Ray Cunningham. And I said, "Ray, I need help." And he just goes, have you hit that place?" And I was like, "I do." And I just burst out crying. And we met and we had a chat, and he put me in contact with a counsellor to go and talk about things. And I messaged my wife and just says, "I'm going to a counsellor, I'm going to get help." And I suppose I started counselling there, and I would go on a Friday evening, Johnny. And I remember going in to think I was going to talk about my dad's death, and I was going to talk about how unreasonable I felt my family had acted around his death. Like, I didn't speak to my mum for 2 months, I think, after he had died. And it was because I didn't feel she had acted the way she should have acted and conducted herself while my dad was dying. Like, in hindsight, who was I to make that choice? Who was I to pass that judgment to my mum? And my mum, I was losing the person she'd been with for over 50 years. But I had this, no, I'm right. I'm 100% right, and everybody else is wrong. And I went into the counsellor, and the counsellor said to me, this is what I thought I was going to speak to the counsellor about, and said, "Have you ever suffered any childhood trauma, first of all?" And I said, "No, not at all. Not at all." And then he goes, "Actually, wait, hold on." For the next 6 months, I talked about nothing except just my past and things I hadn't really faced in 30 years. And that process, that unraveling of who I thought I was, who I'd attached myself to be, was really, there were times where I'd talk about something and I would nearly be curled up in the fetal position just automatically, because it was just so it was a lot to take on. But I was talking about things, but I wasn't actually really kind of changing what I was doing, Johnny. So I would go to a counsellor on a Friday. I would talk about these things I haven't spoke about in a long time. And on a Saturday, I'd go out and drink and I'd take coke because of the stuff that was coming up. And I was just stuck in that cycle for the next few months. And while things were kind of improving on the surface, they weren't improving internally for me. And things, yes, I was speaking about stuff, and yes, these things were coming out and I was verbalizing them, but I wasn't dealing with them. So and in fact, my way.
So the awareness had increased, but how you were dealing with them was still the challenge.
Absolutely. So I was dealing with them by going out on a Saturday night. And then the knock-on effect of that was I was miserable on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. So it was just this vicious cycle I'd seemed to be trapped in. And I got around to Christmas time, I remember around December, and I felt like I was losing myself again. I felt like I was kind of just, oh my God, this is getting too much for me. I'm not actually dealing with anything. And I remember having an argument with my wife. We were out for a night, God love her. And I got into the car on the Monday, and because I hadn't spoke, and I started driving. I had nothing on me except the suit. I had been working that day. And I started driving. I pulled up to a hotel in Belfast and I checked in. And I walked up to my hotel room. Didn't know what was coming out. Didn't know what was happening. I didn't actually have a set plan, but I suspected I wasn't going to come out. And I remember I got a shower and I just sat in the bed and I was exhausted. I was so exhausted. I was exhausted of this roller coaster. I was exhausted because I didn't even know who I was. I was exhausted because this mask was just falling off me. This person I'd always thought I was. Like, I suppose when I started to come understanding with myself, I remember being at primary school. This all connects. Being at primary school, I was told I was dyslexic. And I always thought I was stupid. And I would have got sort of teased about that there. But there were other things that had gone on. And when I was moving out of primary school into high school, I wanted to avoid doing exams and doing tests. So I was a bit of a clown. I was always the one messing. So then I couldn't be exposed. So to myself, I wouldn't be exposed for being an idiot. So I would mess and faff about. And I remember when that was happening, I had brown national health glasses back in the day and all this. And I was being told, like, you need to get new glasses, you need to do this and all before you go into high school. And I kind of felt like I was being told you aren't good enough the way you are. That's not what was being said to me, but that's what I was picking up. This is what I come to understand.
The belief you were told yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had to, instead of being so sensitive, I had to become this brash, outgoing, outspoken lad. Really toxic masculinity type thing in regards to, you know, acting the hard lad and all this here. And that's what led me into sort of partying and drinking, and got into trouble and stuff as well. And I suppose I'd attached myself to that. And that person who I always thought I was, that's who I thought I was. I'd attached myself to this character. It was that mask that was dropping. It was that's the transition that was happening. It was like I was now lost, and I knew I can't be this person because underneath I'm not this person. I'm not that guy. Why am I being this guy? And I ended up falling asleep that night in the hotel room. And I woke up. I got dressed. I went down into my car. And I sat in the car. And I had a huge moment of realization that all of this was going to change because I could change everything. I was waiting for someone always to save me, but there was nobody going to save me, only myself. I had spent so long hating myself and who I was on the outside. Everybody thought, oh, he's a great lad. But on the inside was just so much self-loathing. And I knew I could be the only person to save me. I just knew, just this wave of just this realization and this, oh my God, this is actually going to change. I remember sitting in the car and I Googled how to be happy. And there's stuff about listening to podcasts, and I Googled like sort of motivational podcasts. And Rob Dial, a mentor of ours, his podcast had come up. And I put it on in the car that day, listened to it. It just spoke to me. And I was like, this is all changing. I drove home, I spoke to a friend. He phoned my wife and just says, listen, Adrian's here. I went round to see her. Me and my wife have been together since we were 15 years old. And I said, Michaela, we will never go back to what's happened over this last couple of years. I says, I promise you, we are going to change this here, because everyone in this house is the most special thing to me as well, and that included myself. And the next morning, she bought me a coffee cup and a black notepad, which was this. And I wrote in it, I don't know, my book of growth.
My book of growth. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
If you're listening, it says my book of growth.
That's literally all it says. It's just a black notepad. And I went down to the beach to live close to a beach, and the first thing I wrote was a poem about the voices within our head and how I was going to overcome them. And I made a wee video of that there as well.
Yeah, great video.
From then, Johnny, everything changed. I just went on a journey of self-discovery, of growth, of dropping the bad habits for the good ones. And I just realized what was important to me in life when I really dived into it. And I wanted to have a life of service. I wanted to be able to give. I wanted to be able to help other people by me learning about my own experiences, but then from some self-education, from other mentors, from different qualifications then. And I honestly just knew coaching was my route. So when I left my corporate job and all of that, none of it seemed to me like this is a massive, massive step. It just felt natural. It all felt natural that this is how I can make an impact and this is the difference I can make from speaking, from having these conversations, which I love having these types of conversations with people, and being able to then help people sort of overcome their own problems and get, clear on what they want and being able to help them move forward. So that was a wee bit about how my journey brought me to where we are.
And thank you for sharing that. That's some very vulnerable and open things you've shared there. So really appreciate it. And someone listening really maybe in a similar situation. So it's amazing when we can open up. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. Would kind of I be it sounds like there's several things that kind of shifted for you, and as you had more awareness, kind of that really helped you discover a little bit more about yourself and actually what you wanted to deliver. Would I be accurate to say then that there was a lot of suffering in some of your life because perhaps you were focused more on stuff on yourself in your own mind, but when you started to look at other people and how you could contribute, that kind of really helped you shift into that better state and feeling good about life?
Absolutely. Once I really drilled down to what was important to me, I really wanted freedom and I wanted to make a difference. And the difference I wanted to make was particularly just within my own community, but then it went wider than that. And I didn't want what I had been through for nothing. And the more understanding I got of it, and the better relationship I then developed with myself, which was hugely important. The relationship I had with myself. If we can't show up for ourselves, we can't show up for anybody else. So I had to start, it sounds kind of selfish, put myself first in order to be at peace with who I was and an understanding of who I was and forgive myself for all these things that I had thought I was. And that there then really radiated out into my own family and gave me then the confidence to go, do you know what, all these stories I told myself about me, they're not true. None of that was, it's all, how many other people feel like this? How many other people are thinking like this? How many other people walk around feeling they're not good enough, feeling that they can't contribute enough, they don't have enough connections? And I knew then the relationship that I started developing myself wasn't going to be for nothing. It was then to be me, to be able to go out and start to help other people. So that there shift on my relationship and my self-love, and I suppose that journey from your mind to your heart is a huge journey. But once you start to connect in with that, you can start to listen to what you truly want. And this is what I wanted. And I knew that the transition I was going through was going to set me in a good place then to help other people. So the relationship changed with myself, then changed really what was important to me and what I really wanted from life going forward and how I could help other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you talked about obviously making sure you were cared for as well. Really important, because you can't contribute and give as effectively or use as much potential as you've got if you're not looking after yourself. I love what you just said about that. That's that's a really good point. There was another point you mentioned in your story about, really interesting, that I picked up on, and you said you Googled how to be happy. That's a really good quality question. And as we both know, Rob talks about it, but sort of like Tony Robbins talks about it, the quality questions we ask ourselves really make a difference to our life. So Googling how to be happy is completely different from how do I get rid of these negative thoughts in some way. But that's a good. How much of a difference did you feel like your questions changed? Did you feel like there was a shift in kind of some of those conversations you were having with yourself?
Absolutely, 100%. Everything I thought about myself was always negative. Plus, I was always a victim to my circumstances. There's always somebody else to blame. And I was never good enough. And I was always stupid. And I wouldn't be able to do that because, I'm just not good enough. Like, Johnny, to give you probably an understanding, for who I was then, would never, ever have had the confidence or balls or anything to go and leave that world. Because the things I thought, like the corporate world, because the things I thought were important to me then, money, because then people can see, oh, look, I've got a good job and I've got money, my car, and all these material things. They were the things that I was attaching myself to. So they were the things that I could show everyone, to show, look, I'm a good person. But inside, it felt like I was rotten to the core. I didn't understand who that was. So the questions I always asked myself were always really disparaging questions, things about why I couldn't do everything. So I started to change that, and that's a lot, even some of the mindset work I would do. I started to really just ask myself proper questions about what's important to me. What is it I really want from life? What is, and I realized it's not material things, it's connections. It's deep connections. It's conversations with other people like we're having today that are actually mean something. It's not the car and things of this nature. Those things can maybe come down the line or whatever, but that's what the shift in the questions I started asking myself were more empowering questions. Really, especially the self-work I'd done, it was really to dive in, and it's like a layer on top of layers. So when you start to really kind of journal, that's when I really started to take up journaling, which again was in this book and my growth book, by the way. That's what I'm talking about. When I started to ask myself the questions in that, I would go into layers of questions and really find out what it was that I had wanted. So the questions became very empowering, finding solutions, finding proper answers. And then really when I'd done that, the course of moving forward and making decisions to move into coaching, to start to speaking, to be vulnerable, I felt being authentic, because I never felt like I'd been authentic my whole life. So being authentic and showing up as myself and speaking my truth became paramount. So even when I share my story with you today, Johnny, and your listeners, I can't, I have to show up as who I am. I have to tell my story because that allows me to move beyond it. And I always feel it by verbalizing something that no longer has a control over you. So even before I do a speaking event, even before I was doing this podcast, I was nervous because I get butterflies. I get nervous before I do podcasts or speaking events or workshops. And I'll tell the room that. I'll just say, listen, I get a little bit nervous, and then I feel it relieves some of the tension within inside me. So I just felt that there was hugely important, really, in that regards, to be able to show up like that.
Yeah, and I love what you've touched on about nerves and fear and stuff like that, because it's one point I always like to, and that's been authentic actually, not showing like, oh, I have no fears and everything's right in my life. There's no one like that. And I always emphasize the point that people you often see as confident appearing are not, they don't have zero fears. It's just the fact that they're willing to go through with it anyway. And, they're pushing through that fear a little bit. So that's a really important point. And then actually opening up so we can see that in others is really, really key as well. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely, John. And it gives other people permission to kind of realize I'm not the only one here.
Yeah.
Maybe I can speak my truth. Maybe I can let that go. And I think that's hugely important. And it's funny, like when we overcome fears, I remember even for the coaching we were with Rob and his group, and he had suggested, like I'd only joined about, offering your services for free. And I was like, God, I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew this was what I had to do, and I knew, this is my path, and I'm walking, and there was something pulling me along this path. So I remember just once he had suggested that, putting that out on my Instagram, saying I want to help coach somebody, it'd be for free, and we'll work with a couple of the clients. And then that was the start of it. I did have fears and apprehension, but it wasn't going to allow it to stop me. And because it didn't allow it to stop me, it's then sent me on this path that this is now what I do full time. Which, if I hadn't done, I had to give in to what I was definitely scared at that there time, that was I good enough to do this? Then I would possibly never have been in this position, and I don't know what position I'd be in at that stage.
Exactly. And yeah, me myself, like even just when you start off your journey, your coaching journey, I was like terrified to talk to the first people on the phone and be like, even though I didn't value myself as highly as I do now, then it was, I was really undervaluing myself at the start. Even, to just suggest I'm a coach, this is what I offer. It was like terrified. And, now and then as you kind of go up especially as you go up in the personal growth journey, the more, fears are going to come at you, because the more you're coming out of your comfort zone and things are changing. So it's important to recognize we all have those fears. So I'm really glad you shared that.
Absolutely. And we're always learning, it doesn't stop in that regard. Learning doesn't stop, growing doesn't stop. How you coach today may be different than in 12 months' time. You may you do a new course, pick up new techniques, find new ways of coaching, of connecting with people. And that's all really important, that you're open to those realms of growth, and nothing's forever, nothing's final. And it's an open book. And once you're living like that and you're aware that you can learn so much from everybody else, there's so many people we can learn information from, and it's approaching people or learning new things from. And it's being open to that, never thinking you know it all, and being able to just go along, take things from different people, different aspects, and create your own model about what it is you want to do. And I think that there's an amazing place to be in life when you're opening yourself up and willing to learn from everybody.
Absolutely, totally agree. And yeah, it's progress. Definitely, when you make that progress and sort of like learning from others, that's a really great place to be. So I could have had another question, one directly related to that, but you're a big fan of journaling, and that's really made a big difference to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I always say we're all sort of like different, and what might work for some, there are some general things that can help a majority of people, but what might work for one person might be slightly different from someone else. But what perhaps are some of the main things or the habits that you find particularly useful on your journey to keep on top of on a regular basis outside of the journaling?
Okay, so when I was telling you about the story, I roll out of bed, get myself ready, argue with the house, just leave the house in a state. I was in a hyper state. I had started the day off in a negative fashion, on the phone, coffee, running out.
Yeah.
When my wife had given me this book at the start, and everything I was doing at the very start, when I first got this book, it wasn't, I'm going to be a coach. That has come through from my own journey. It was about how I was going to change myself at that time. So I had to ask myself, what am I doing that is damaging me, that isn't serving me? And I realized, obviously, drinking wasn't great. Taking drugs wasn't great, by an understatement. And even some of my daily habits. So I looked at the fact, what does my morning look like? My morning's awful. It's an awful way to start the day for me and my family. So one of the first things I done was create a morning routine. And I know people talk about morning routines, but it became life-changing for me, Johnny, to create a morning routine. And that routine has constantly evolved and changed over time. So like now, how it looks, how I start my morning, I get up an hour before the rest of the house, at least an hour, just depends some days. And I will do yoga, meditation, and I will do some journaling and maybe take the dog out for a walk, or then sit and have a quiet cup of coffee just to myself. And that way of starting the day, of really coming inward and at peace and calm, then I'm ready to start my day. So kids get up, making them their breakfast, get my wife the coffee on, and just really just flowing into my day. And then I'm really ready to start a day's work. But other things, Johnny, like I was always watching the political phone-in programs, even the likes of the sports phone-in talk shows, and all of this, things of just constant negative news and people arguing and bitching and fighting with each other and screaming and shouting, and the TV shows I would watch. And I had to change, all of that changed. I started to change the more informative podcasts, just watching stuff that filled me up, reading a lot more. So I started to change what information I was taking in. And that made a big difference, because if we're like, I'll even give you, like, we look at COVID, and if you were sitting watching the news cycles of COVID over this last year, it can't help but have a massive impact on your state of mind. Because it's just constantly being bombarded to us, and there is certain amounts of information we need to know, but we don't need to be exposed constantly to the negativity from it. So I just would distance myself from things like that, and I am very careful of the information I put in. So definitely creating a good solid morning routine and taking in information that's going to benefit me and not make me feel bad.
Yeah,
they were some of the big things that I changed myself, John.
I'm particularly big fan of what you said around, well, all of it is fantastic, but what you said around the information we take in, because that makes a huge difference. Not just the way we talk to ourselves, because calling ourselves an idiot now and then, that causes more of an impact than you think. You know, that is going into your mind, that's been stored there. So, but it's also what you're listening to. If you're listening to, I don't know what, you know, the death rate is today of COVID or anything like that, it's going into your system. Now, for me, I even pay attention to the songs I'm listening to, because some songs have some quite down and sad lyrics. Well, there's a song called Unstoppable by Sia. I don't know if you know it. It goes, I'm so confident I'm unstoppable. That's constantly playing in my mind. And guess how I feel? Usually pretty good from listening to
Very
that.
good.
And, or like, don't worry, be happy. I don't know, Rob talks about this. Kind of list those songs and the information you're listening to. So if you're listening to your podcast, as you mentioned, listen to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast. That's a pretty cool one as well.
Definitely listen to that one.
Listening to all these podcasts. So yeah, or the information is key. So I'm really, really glad you touched on that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So Adrian, just kind of before we sort of like wrap up today, really, are there any sort of like last points you'd like to share? You've given us so much value today, and thank you for that.
No, you're absolutely welcome, Johnny. Guys, if I was to share anything, it is changing the relationship we have with ourselves will completely change how we view the world and the relationships we have in the world. Truly, truly mean that. My own journey, I'm a testament to that. The people I've been working with are a testament to that. And how we see the world is often a reflection of how we see ourselves. The offense we take of somebody else is usually a reflection of what we're seeing ourselves within that person or within that situation. And if we can really, and it is a hard journey, because a lot of the time to make peace with ourselves, we're making peace with our past. We're making peace with who we thought we were. We're making peace with the fact that I am good enough. I am worthy. I am worthy of my own time. And to make some time for yourself to check in, some self-care, self-love. And I'm telling you, that will radiate throughout the rest of your life. So if that's a point and you're going to start somewhere, start with the relationship you have with yourself. Because the victim mentality that there's always somebody else to blame for where we are in life is just going to keep us stuck. Where once we feel empowered by ourselves and take control of who we are, that's what will come out. That's what will radiate out. So that's what I would say. Change relationship with yourself. Believe in yourself and invest in yourself, which is maybe tagline.
Great tagline. No, that's a really, really great point to end on. So, Adrian, where can people find you?
AdrianDevlin.com, AdrianDevlin. And you can get me on Instagram at AidYDev, AIDYDEV, and on my Facebook, Adrian Devlin. But usually on my Instagram, you'll find I put out blogs and information and things on that. So you should get some good value content there as well. So yeah, you can find me there, guys.
Absolutely. And what we'll do is we'll put the links to your pages you just referenced in the description as well, so people can directly get to your pages that you've just referenced as well.
Thank you very much.
Of course, no problem. So yeah, once again, Adrian, thank you for so much value you've given today and insight and, sharing your full story. So being a wonderful guest. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Johnny. Take care.
Of course. And we will catch you in the next episode.